June 6, 1944. The shores of Normandy, France. The day the Allies would strike the heart of Nazi-occupied Europe. Operation Overlord, the largest amphibious invasion in history, had begun. Months of meticulous planning, deception, and coordination had led to this moment. Soldiers from America, Britain, Canada, and beyond waited in the landing craft, knowing the dangers that lay ahead. The Allies would land across 5 beaches: Utah and Omaha under American command, Gold, Juno, and Sword held by British and Canadian forces. Each beach fortified with mines, machine guns, and artillery, part of Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Before dawn, thousands of paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines, tasked with securing bridges and roads, disrupting German reinforcements, and clearing the path for the main assault. As the first waves hit the sands, bullets and shells tore through the air. Thousands fell. Yet the troops pushed forward, scaling cliffs, cutting through barbed wire, and storming bunkers. Sacrifice marked every step. By the end of the day, the Allies had established a tenuous foothold on French soil. Though costly, the invasion marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany in Western Europe. D-Day was not just a battle on the beaches, it was the opening of the Western Front. From here, the campaign would push deeper into Normandy, setting the stage for the decisive battles to come, including the Falaise trap.
After D-Day, the Allies faced more than just the beaches of Normandy. Germany had fortified the region with an elaborate network known as the Atlantic Wall. From the cliffs to the hedgerows, every mile was defended with bunkers, machine gun nests, artillery, and minefields. Every hill and ridge became a potential killing ground. The 7th and 5th Panzer armies were stationed strategically to repel any Allied breakthrough. Experienced soldiers, tanks, and mobile artillery units were ready to counterattack wherever the invaders tried to advance. Rommel, the famed field marshal, had insisted on turning Normandy into a fortress. German engineers dug trenches, laid barbed wire, and rigged obstacles on beaches and roads to slow the Allied advance. Yet the lines were rigid and overextended. German units were stretched thin, hampered by poor communications and conflicting orders from Berlin. This would later prove critical when the Allies began their push inland. Despite their strength and preparation, the German defensive lines were vulnerable to coordination, surprise, and air superiority, setting the stage for the encirclement that would become the Falaise trap.
As the Allies pushed inland from Normandy, German forces faced increasing pressure. Yet Hitler's orders were clear and uncompromising: no retreat, no surrender. Field commanders were forbidden from falling back, even when positions became untenable. Roads clogged with tanks, artillery, and retreating soldiers became death traps. Units trapped by Allied advances were left with little choice but to fight to the last man. Hitler believed that holding every inch of territory would stop the Allies and buy time for reinforcements. But in reality, these orders crippled German flexibility and made coordinated defense nearly impossible. Field commanders, including the respected Field Marshal Model, often found themselves caught between following Hitler's rigid commands and saving what remained of their forces. The insistence on holding ground at all costs led to chaos, massive losses, and ultimately, the encirclement at Falaise. The no-retreat policy would become one of the defining factors of the German collapse in Normandy, demonstrating how inflexible leadership can turn a defensive position into a deadly trap.
The success of D-Day and the Normandy campaign depended not only on brute force, but on deception and cunning strategy. The Allies launched a series of operations designed to confuse the Germans about the true invasion point. Operation Fortitude was the centerpiece. Fake armies, inflatable tanks, dummy landing craft, and radio traffic suggested that the Allies would strike at Pas-de-Calais, hundreds of miles from Normandy. German intelligence and commanders were misled. Troops were held back in areas where the invasion would never come, leaving the actual beaches of Normandy less defended than they might have been. Even after the landings began, feints and diversionary attacks kept German forces guessing. Paratroopers and commando raids behind enemy lines added to the confusion, striking at roads, bridges, and communication lines. These deceptions bought the Allies precious hours and slowed German responses, allowing the beachheads to expand. Without these feints, the German defenses in Normandy might have held far longer, and the campaign could have ended very differently.
After the initial landings in Normandy, the Allies faced the challenge of turning their beachheads into a decisive victory. The key was not just breaking through German lines, but trapping the enemy before they could regroup. British General Bernard Montgomery and American General Omar Bradley coordinated a bold plan, a pincer movement to encircle the German forces in northern France. Montgomery's forces would advance south from the Caen sector, while Bradley's armies would push north from the southern flank. The goal was to cut off the German 7th and 5th Panzer armies, trapping them in what would become known as the Falaise pocket. Speed, coordination, and timing were critical. A delay could allow the Germans to escape. Montgomery's meticulous planning ensured that the northern forces moved steadily, while Bradley's men exploited gaps in the German lines. Air support, artillery, and armored units were integrated into the plan to maintain pressure and prevent breakout attempts. This strategy marked a turning point in the Normandy campaign. By combining precision, speed, and overwhelming firepower, the Allies set the stage for the encirclement that would crush German forces and pave the way for liberation of France. After securing their beachheads, the Allies faced a critical objective: pushing through Normandy quickly enough to prevent the Germans from regrouping. This became known as the Race to the Seine River. American and British forces raced across the Norman countryside, exploiting gaps in German defenses. Speed was essential. Any delay could allow German units to reinforce positions or escape the encirclement. Towns, roads, and rivers became strategic points. Allied forces moved with tanks, infantry, and artillery in tight coordination, while airborne units secured key crossings ahead of the main advance. German forces were in disarray. Confused by the speed and direction of the Allied push, many units retreated chaotically, clogging roads and slowing their own escape. The race to the Seine River was more than a tactical maneuver. It was a battle of timing and momentum. By forcing the Germans to retreat under pressure, the Allies set the stage for the decisive encirclement at Falaise, turning a regional battle into a strategic collapse for the German army in Normandy.
While the northern Allied forces moved steadily, General George S. Patton led a daring and rapid advance from the south, exploiting weaknesses in the German lines. Patton's push was aggressive, bold, and fast, designed to catch the enemy off guard and cut off their retreat. After defeating Germany in North Africa, Patton was taken off combat for slapping 2 soldiers suffering from battle fatigue. He called them cowards and threatened to shoot them. Eisenhower took Patton out of commission and wouldn't have anything to do with him until the excellent external effects of deception plan Fortitude, which some think actually had him commanding a fake army, changed his mind. Using armored divisions and mechanized infantry, Patton moved through the Norman countryside at an unprecedented pace. His forces seized key towns, bridges, and road junctions, preventing German units from regrouping or establishing new defensive positions. Patton's push was aggressive, bold, and fast, designed to catch the enemy off guard and cut off their retreat.
This rapid maneuver was critical in the closing of the Falaise pocket, as it denied the Germans any safe corridor to withdraw. Patton's audacity and mobility exemplified how bold leadership and swift action could change the course of a campaign.
As the Allies pressed the Germans from north and south, Canadian forces played a crucial role in closing off the escape routes. Positioned in the north, they advanced toward key towns and roadways leading out of Normandy. Their mission was clear: prevent German units from fleeing the encirclement and secure the northern flank of the Falaise pocket. Every town, village, and crossroads became a critical objective. The Canadians faced fierce resistance. German troops, desperate to escape, launched counterattacks, defended roadblocks, and set ambushes. Yet the Canadians steadily pushed forward, capturing strategic positions and cutting off retreat paths. By holding these escape routes, the Canadian forces ensured that the German 7th and 5th Panzer armies were trapped between the advancing northern and southern Allied forces. Their efforts were key to the eventual success of the Falaise encirclement, sealing the fate of tens of thousands of German soldiers.
Air superiority was one of the Allies' greatest advantages in Normandy. Allied reconnaissance planes scoured the countryside, tracking German troop movements, supply lines, and defensive positions. High above, pilots and observers provided real-time intelligence to commanders on the ground. They spotted columns of retreating German armor, congested roads, and weak points in the defensive lines, allowing Allied forces to strike with precision. Reconnaissance was not just observation, it guided airstrikes, artillery bombardments, and ground maneuvers. By mapping German positions and movements, the Allies could coordinate their encirclement of the Falaise pocket with deadly accuracy. The presence of Allied aircraft also sowed panic among German troops. Retreating units faced not only advancing armies on the ground, but relentless attacks from the skies, further slowing their escape and increasing casualties. In Normandy, Air Reconnaissance turned information into power, giving the Allies a crucial edge in closing the trap that would crush the German forces.
As the Allies advanced through Normandy, German command structures began to crumble. Conflicting orders from Hitler, rigid no-retreat policies, and disrupted communications created chaos among German units. Field commanders on the ground often received contradictory instructions, unsure whether to hold their positions, counterattack, or attempt to break out. Delays and misunderstandings slowed responses, leaving units exposed to Allied offensives. The fog of war, combined with relentless air attacks and artillery bombardments, made coordination nearly impossible. German divisions became isolated, roads clogged with retreating troops, and panic spread through the ranks. This confusion amplified the effectiveness of Allied movements, making it easier for northern and southern forces to tighten the encirclement. Even experienced commanders struggled to maintain order, and many units were destroyed or captured before they could act. In Normandy, German command confusion turned disciplined forces into a disorganized, vulnerable army, paving the way for the Falaise trap.
By mid-August 1944, the Allies had pushed deep into Normandy, and the stage was set for a decisive maneuver. The goal? Trap the German 7th and 5th Panzer armies in a tightening pocket around Falaise. Northern forces under Montgomery moved south, while southern forces under Patton surged north. Between them, German units found themselves pinned, with no safe route to retreat. Roads became clogged with tanks, artillery, and fleeing soldiers, turning escape into a deadly maze. The Allies carefully coordinated airstrikes, artillery, and ground assaults to seal gaps and prevent breakouts. Every town, village, and crossroads mattered as the encirclement slowly tightened. By August 19th, the Falaise pocket had largely formed. Tens of thousands of German soldiers were trapped, facing overwhelming firepower from all sides. The situation was dire, and chaos reigned within the German ranks. The formation of the Falaise pocket marked the beginning of the destruction of a large portion of the German forces in Western Europe, a turning point that would accelerate the liberation of France.
Trapped in the Falaise pocket, German forces launched desperate counterattacks in a final attempt to break free. Tanks, infantry, and artillery surged against advancing Allied lines, but their efforts were fragmented and poorly coordinated. Chaos and confusion hindered German commanders. Some units attacked without support, others tried to clear roads for retreat, and many were met with relentless Allied artillery and airstrikes. The pockets of resistance slowed the Allies only briefly. Every counterattack was costly. Thousands of German soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured, and much of their heavy equipment was abandoned. Roads and towns became scenes of intense fighting as retreating units collided with those trying to escape. Despite their bravery, the German counterattacks failed to stop the encirclement. The Allies steadily closed the trap, tightening the Falaise pocket and sealing the fate of the trapped German armies.
The Battle of Normandy was not fought in empty fields. It unfolded across towns, villages, and countryside where civilians lived. French civilians bore the brunt of the fighting, caught between retreating German forces and advancing Allies. Homes were destroyed by artillery, airstrikes, and tank battles. Roads clogged with fleeing soldiers and refugees became dangerous and chaotic. Many civilians were injured, displaced, or killed in the crossfire. Daily life was shattered. Food was scarce, communication disrupted, and families were separated. Some civilians tried to aid soldiers or provide shelter, while others were forced to flee or hide in cellars and forests. The relentless pace of the battle, combined with fear and uncertainty, left a lasting psychological and physical toll on the local population. The civilian suffering in Normandy is a stark reminder that war affects not only armies, but the ordinary people who live in its path, an often overlooked yet tragic element of the Falaise campaign.
As the Falaise pocket tightened, German retreat turned into a chaotic nightmare. Roads became clogged with soldiers, tanks, artillery, and supply wagons, all desperately trying to escape the encirclement. Movement slowed to a crawl. Vehicles broke down, bridges became bottlenecks, and exhausted troops were forced to abandon equipment just to keep moving. Allied air forces and artillery targeted these crowded routes, turning the highways into deadly killing zones. Panic spread among the German ranks. Units collided with one another, and organized defense became impossible. The once disciplined army now struggled to survive, caught between the advancing Allies from north and south. These choked roads were more than just physical obstacles. They were a symbol of the German army's collapse. Every hour lost meant more men and machines trapped, leading directly to massive casualties and the eventual destruction of the Falaise pocket.
As the Falaise pocket closed, Allied artillery and air power became relentless instruments of destruction. Cannons and howitzers hammered German positions, while fighter bombers and bombers struck retreating columns and fortified defenses from the sky. Every road, bridge, and village within the pocket was under threat. Retreating German troops faced not only advancing Allied forces, but a continuous storm of shells, bombs, and strafing attacks. Tanks were destroyed, vehicles overturned, and troops scattered. The combination of precise artillery barrages and targeted airstrikes prevented organized German breakouts. Even experienced units found it nearly impossible to regroup or mount effective counterattacks. These bombardments inflicted heavy casualties and destroyed critical supplies, turning the encirclement into a decisive and devastating defeat. By the time the Falaise pocket fully closed, the German army had suffered catastrophic losses, leaving tens of thousands dead, wounded, or captured.
Amid the chaos of the Falaise pocket, Field Marshal Walter Model faced one of the most desperate situations of the war. Tasked with holding collapsing German lines, he struggled to organize a coherent defense and manage the retreat of encircled units. Model was known for his tactical skill and determination, but even he could not overcome the overwhelming Allied pressure, poor communications, and Hitler's rigid no-retreat orders. He moved tirelessly between units, trying to rally troops, direct counterattacks, and maintain order amidst chaos. Despite his efforts, the German army continued to fragment. Supplies were cut off, roads were clogged with retreating forces, and morale plummeted. Model's leadership slowed the collapse, but it could not prevent the eventual destruction of the trapped forces. His actions, however, demonstrated courage and dedication in the face of inevitable defeat, highlighting the human element of command under extreme conditions. Field Marshal Model's leadership was a last line of defense in a battle that had already turned decisively against Germany.
The German collapse in Normandy was not only due to Allied skill, it was also fueled by Hitler's strategic miscalculations. His insistence on holding every position, combined with rigid no-retreat orders, left German forces trapped and vulnerable. Hitler overestimated the strength of his troops, underestimating the speed and coordination of the Allied advance. He refused to allow flexible withdrawals, even when commanders on the ground warned that encirclement was imminent. These decisions created confusion, slowed effective responses, and forced German units into desperate situations where defeat was almost guaranteed. Entire divisions were lost, not just to battlefield pressure, but to inflexible leadership from above. Hitler's miscalculations turned what might have been a controlled retreat into a catastrophic rout, directly contributing to the formation of the Falaise pocket and the destruction of tens of thousands of German soldiers.
British General Bernard Montgomery played a pivotal role in the Falaise campaign through careful coordination of Northern and Southern Allied forces. His strategy relied on closing the encirclement from the north while maintaining pressure on German defenses. Montgomery worked closely with American forces under General Omar Bradley in the south. The goal was to synchronize movements, ensuring that German troops could not slip through gaps between the advancing armies. Timing and communication were critical. By coordinating attacks, Montgomery ensured that airstrikes, artillery, and armored units were used effectively across the front. His steady advance from the north met Patton's rapid southern push, gradually tightening the Falaise pocket. This coordination transformed a complex battlefield into a strategically controlled encirclement, demonstrating the power of combined Allied planning and the importance of unified command in achieving decisive results.
American General Omar Bradley led the Southern Allied forces with aggressive and decisive action, aiming to link up with Northern forces and complete the encirclement of the Germans. Bradley's strategy relied on speed, mobility, and coordination with armored divisions and mechanized infantry. By advancing quickly through the southern sector, his forces threatened German retreat routes and prevented the enemy from regrouping. The bold push forced German units into confused, chaotic withdrawals, leaving tanks,
artillery and supplies abandoned on roads and in villages. Bradley's timing was crucial. Any delay could have allowed large portions of the German army to escape. By driving north and linking with Montgomery's forces from the north, Bradley helped seal the Falaise pocket, demonstrating how bold leadership and calculated risk could decisively shape the battlefield.
General George S. Patton was renowned for his speed, audacity, and aggressive tactics, which played a crucial role in the Falaise campaign. From the south, Patton's forces executed rapid maneuvers to exploit gaps in German defenses. Using armored divisions, mechanized infantry, and artillery support, Patton advanced at an unprecedented pace, seizing key towns, road junctions, and bridges before the Germans could react. His movements created chaos in the German rear, cutting off retreat paths and trapping enemy units. Patton's relentless push forced German commanders to make hasty decisions, often abandoning equipment and supplies. Retreating soldiers collided with one another on crowded roads, turning the escape into a deadly bottleneck. Through these daring maneuvers, Patton accelerated the collapse of the German armies in Normandy, helping to close the Falaise pocket and cementing his reputation as one of the most audacious commanders of the war.
By mid-August 1944, the German army in Normandy was rapidly unraveling. The combination of Allied advances from north and south, relentless artillery and air attacks, and chaotic command left units fragmented and disorganized. Tanks, infantry, and artillery were abandoned as soldiers struggled to escape the tightening Falaise pocket. Roads became congested with retreating forces, making coordinated defense impossible. Many units simply ceased to exist as effective fighting forces. The collapse was total. Entire divisions were destroyed or captured, leaving few organized troops to resist the Allies. German morale plummeted as survivors faced constant attack, dwindling supplies, and hopeless odds. This breakdown of German units ensured the success of the Allied encirclement, demonstrating how speed, coordination, and overwhelming firepower could turn a strong defensive army into a shattered remnant.
As the Falaise pocket closed, the Allies captured tens of thousands of German soldiers, delivering a devastating blow to the enemy's strength in Western Europe. Many troops, trapped between the advancing northern and southern forces, had no choice but to surrender. Roads and villages overflowed with prisoners, abandoned equipment, and supplies, highlighting the scale of the German defeat. These captured soldiers included experienced veterans and units that had fought across Europe for years. Their loss weakened German resistance, reduced combat effectiveness, and deprived the army of both manpower and morale. The mass surrender at Falaise was a turning point in the Normandy campaign, symbolizing the collapse of the German defensive position and marking the beginning of a rapid Allied advance across France.
The destruction of German forces in the Falaise pocket had far-reaching strategic consequences. Tens of thousands of troops were killed, wounded, or captured, and much of the German equipment was lost, leaving the army severely weakened. With their front lines shattered, Germany lost control of Normandy and was forced into a continuous retreat across France. The collapse accelerated the liberation of French territory and opened the path to the German border. The loss also crippled German morale and command cohesion. Hitler's rigid strategies, combined with the failure to respond effectively, left remaining forces disorganized and vulnerable to further Allied offensives. Strategically, the Falaise disaster marked the beginning of the end for Germany on the Western Front, turning what could have been a prolonged defense into a rapid Allied advance that would ultimately lead to the fall of Berlin.
The victory in Normandy came at a high cost for the Allies. Thousands of soldiers were killed or wounded during the intense fighting to break German defenses and close the Falaise pocket. landing on fortified beaches, storming towns, and advancing through heavily defended countryside exposed troops to machine guns, artillery, mines, and tank fire. Even with superior planning, the human cost was significant. Aircraft and armored units also suffered losses. Many vehicles and tanks were destroyed or damaged in battle, and supply lines were stretched as the front moved rapidly across the region. Despite these sacrifices, the casualties were far lower than the losses inflicted on the Germans. The success of the encirclement justified the cost, paving the way for a rapid Allied advance across France while demonstrating the brutal reality of high-intensity warfare.
The battles across Normandy left a trail of destruction in their wake. Towns and villages were reduced to rubble as artillery, airstrikes, and tank battles tore through streets and homes. Civilians fled or hid as buildings burned, roads were blocked by wreckage, and essential services collapsed. Churches, schools, and marketplaces, symbols of everyday life, were destroyed, leaving communities in ruins. The destruction was not limited to immediate combat zones. Retreating German forces and advancing Allies alike damaged infrastructure, further disrupting communication and supply lines. These ruined towns became a stark reminder of the human and cultural cost of war. Beyond military objectives, the devastation of Normandy shaped the lives of survivors for years, marking the landscape with the scars of battle.
The Battle of Normandy and the Falaise pocket left lasting memories for the soldiers who fought there. Many described the chaos, intensity, and sheer scale of the fighting with vivid detail. American, British, and Canadian troops spoke of endless artillery fire, strafing aircraft, and the struggle to advance through minefields and hedgerows. Some recalled seeing entire German units trapped, destroyed, or surrendering along clogged roads. German soldiers told stories of desperation and confusion, caught in a tightening encirclement, trying to escape while facing relentless Allied attacks. Fear, exhaustion, and the collapse of command created moments of both courage and tragedy. These first-hand accounts bring the battle to life, offering a human perspective on strategy, tactics, and the staggering consequences of the Falaise trap. They remind us that behind every map and statistic were real people enduring unimaginable conditions.
The people of Normandy lived through the horrors of battle firsthand. Civilians described streets filled with rubble, terrified families fleeing, and the constant roar of artillery and aircraft overhead. Many recounted hiding in cellars or forests while tanks and soldiers passed through their villages. Some tried to aid the wounded or provide shelter, while others were forced to watch as homes, schools, and churches were destroyed. Food shortages, disrupted communication, and the uncertainty of survival added to the trauma. Even after the fighting moved on, survivors faced the long task of rebuilding their lives and communities. These eyewitness accounts highlight the human cost of war beyond the battlefield, showing how ordinary people endured fear, loss, and resilience amid one of World War II's fiercest campaigns.
The Falaise pocket was not only a physical trap, it was a psychological nightmare for German soldiers. Encircled, under constant attack from artillery and aircraft, and facing relentless Allied advances, fear and desperation gripped the troops. Many soldiers witnessed friends killed or wounded, tanks destroyed, and entire units surrendering or disintegrating. Chaos on the roads and confusion in command left them isolated and uncertain,
compounding stress and panic. The rigid orders from Hitler to hold positions at all costs intensified the strain. Soldiers had to fight while knowing retreat could mean death, yet staying often led to the same fate. Exhaustion, trauma, and hopelessness weakened morale, reducing combat effectiveness. The psychological toll turned many experienced troops into disoriented, demoralized, and vulnerable fighters, highlighting how the mental strain of warfare can be as decisive as physical losses in determining the outcome of a battle.
The Falaise pocket became a textbook example of encirclement warfare, offering valuable lessons for military strategy. Speed, coordination, and timing proved decisive in trapping a numerically strong enemy. Allied forces demonstrated the importance of synchronized movements between multiple fronts, combining northern and southern advances with air and artillery support to close gaps and prevent escape. The battle also highlighted the dangers of rigid command and inflexible orders. German insistence on holding positions at all costs prevented tactical withdrawals, turning a retreat into a catastrophic encirclement. Control of roads, key towns, and supply lines proved critical, showing how geography and logistics influence the success of an encirclement. Ultimately, the Falaise pocket illustrated that planning, intelligence, and decisive execution can turn a strong defensive army into a trapped and defeated force, leaving lessons still studied by modern militaries today.
The Falaise trap remains one of World War II's most decisive and studied battles. It demonstrated how speed, coordination, and overwhelming force can destroy even a well-trained enemy. Military historians regard it as a classic example of encirclement warfare, showing the consequences of poor communication, rigid command, and failure to adapt under pressure. Tens of thousands of German troops were killed, wounded, or captured, permanently weakening Germany's ability to defend Western Europe. The battle also influenced post-war military doctrine, emphasizing the importance of combined arms, intelligence, and the integration of air, artillery, and ground forces in modern operations. Beyond strategy, the Falaise trap left a lasting impact on the people and landscapes of Normandy, reminding future generations of the human cost of war and the decisive power of well-executed plans.